All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to, on behalf of everyone here, on behalf of the panelists, on behalf of the Vision Expo team, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Eye to Eye Coffee Talk series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terrence Lackren, aka the Optical Poet, and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Programming with the Vision Council. We have an amazing panelist today. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about some housekeeping items. For one, as you can see, we decided to use the platform Zoom. And the reason why we chose Zoom is because of what you see right now. We can see each other, we can chat with each other, we can interact. It has a nice community feel to it, especially because most of us haven't seen each other in almost a year. So we're able to really connect with us as an industry. But for this to work out the way it should, it's very important that unless you are a panelist or you're speaking, please keep your microphones on mute so it doesn't disrupt the flow of conversation. Now, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat box to go ahead and type your question in. Or if you're brave, you can use the raise your hand feature to ask a live question. Now how do you do that? Well, you go down to participants on the bottom of your screen, you click that on, and you hit the button that says raise your hand, and that will indicate that you have a live question to ask. So we might not get to everyone's question, but if you do have a live question, we'll unmute you, you come on video, you may ask that question as well. Now, for some reason, if we get disconnected, please just log off and come back in 5 minutes. If after 5 minutes you notice that we're still not up and running, we ask you to just await an email and we will reschedule this panel to another date and we will keep you informed. All right, so now that that's all out of the way, I'm very excited about this panel. You know, we started this panel subject a few weeks ago called Open Your Eyes, and we had a panel mostly filled with people of color, Black people of color, and we also had Howard on here speaking as an ally. And one part that really stuck with our audience, with me, is unfortunate, but the voices of allies right now on the topic of diversity and inclusion go a lot farther than they do with Black people of color. So what we decided to do is Howard and I spoke, and we decided to gather some allies in the industry who are non-people of color to really speak about what true allyship means and why diversity and inclusion is so important right now. So I don't think I've ever been to a diversity panel where there was not a person of color on it, but I think this shows that it's just not all, it's all of our responsibility to speak on the topic of diversity. So that being said, I'm going to introduce Dr. Howard Purcell. Howard was, as I mentioned before, on our first panel. When I thought about picking an ally, I knew who to choose because Howard and I have had these conversations more than once over a number of years. So Howard, we're very excited. He's president of the New England College of Optometry, and I'm very interested, Howard, and excited about how you're going to conduct this optical diversity symphony.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you. That's quite an introduction, Terrence. Thank you very much. I'm super honored to be here, to be with this incredible group of panelists, and really looking forward to the discussion today. I want to just reiterate what Terrence said. We welcome your comments, your questions, your thoughts. I think it's going to be a lot better and more engaging if we have that. So I want to, again, encourage you. I also, before we go any further, I certainly want to thank the Vision Council and your leadership, Terrence. I really, across the industry, you guys are just doing an incredible job of bringing the important discussions to the surface and to the table, ones that we need to continue having. So thank you so much on behalf of the entire industry for what you guys continue to do. Having said that, you know, this is an incredibly important discussion to have. Certainly racial equity is an important discussion to have, but it's, you know, it can also be an incredibly difficult discussion at times to have. And I have to be honest, particularly for people who aren't people of color. So I want to start off just by saying, look, we're going to make some mistakes. We may say something that isn't consistent with what you believe, but what the purpose of today is to create those avenues for open dialogue. That's what we all want to do. And I just want to make that clear. Everyone's intentions here is to strive and continue to strive for racial equity. Today, our discussions are going to be about people of color, Black people. And for us, I will tell you that we believe the schools and colleges play a very critical role in assuring that we continue to diversify this profession, particularly obviously in the side of optometry. So we'll talk more about those issues, but I just wanted to put that up front. I think it's important we have the voice of allies, and maybe this is a good point to just pause and say, what is allyship? When we started this, I thought a little bit to myself what my own definition would be, and then went out there and talked to a lot of people about what their definition was. So perhaps it's a good place to start, and I'll use this definition for now, and then we'll hear from our panelists, and I'll introduce them in a moment. For me, allyship is building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability. Taking on the struggle as if it's your own. And I have to say, we have a group of people with us today who have done just that. They've taken on this struggle as if it's their own. They have made an impact on this industry. And when Terrence and I were talking about this, and he said to me, who are the people that you've at least observed that have done this? And actually, I was really pleased to say the list was a decent sized list. But the people we have with us today, I hope can inspire others to continue to participate, because it truly appears that if we're gonna really make a difference this time, and I think Terrence touched on this, it really requires the allies, those people who can support our brothers and sisters in the efforts that they're making. And again, this group of people we have before us today have certainly done a great job of doing that. Being a quiet ally is not acceptable. I was about to say is no longer acceptable, but perhaps it's never been acceptable, but particularly now. And so with that said, I want to just very briefly introduce our panel. I will not do this group justice. In the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief, but these people have made incredible contributions to our profession. But more importantly for today, have really put their money where their mouth is, have put their time and effort into really trying to make a difference. And I salute them and credit them for doing that. So joining us today to start is Julia Gogosha. Julia's in LA. She's an optician and she's the owner of Gogosha Optique. She, from what I understand, has some really creative handmade brands. There's really a unique individual in terms of how she runs her business and how she takes care of her customers. It's a privilege to have Julia with us today. Welcome to Julia. In addition to Julia, we have Dr. Myles Zakheim. Myles is also in LA. He is the CEO of Optometrix and the co-owner of Zakheim. He's in the Beverly Hills area and actually has some interesting stories to tell us about his experiences over the past several months. And he's also an ICO grad. We won't hold that against Myles, but wonderful College of Optometry, that's for sure. Welcome to Myles.
Thank you.
In addition, a couple of my good friends are joining us as well. First, Sue Downs from MyEyeDr. Everyone knows Sue. Sue has been such an impactful person in our industry just across the board, and we expected nothing less than what she's delivered over these past several months through her wonderful practitioners and the people that represent in MyEyeDr. So Sue, welcome. I could say so much more about you. I know you guys now have over 600 locations. Just incredible what you've done, and really the quality and the professionalism of your business is truly remarkable. So welcome to Sue. Very happy to have you here with us as well. And last but certainly not least, now kind of an old friend of mine these days. We go back to, I think, before Neil's time at Warby Parker, when we were together doing philanthropic activities. Neil Blumenthal. Neil, of course, is, I think most of you know, is the co-founder and co-CEO of Warby Parker. And Neil has really, to me, been almost one of the real guiding lights with regard to this area. His development of racial equity strategies for his team has really, for me, set the bar for many of us. So looking forward to hearing from Neil. Neil, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So that said, why don't we dive right in? I sort of gave an overview of what my belief is sort of allyship is, but I think we'd like to hear from our panelists. Why is allyship important, particularly at this time, and what does it mean to you? So Julia, we're going to let you start if you don't mind.
I think it's just the way we show up in this world for each other. And right now, excuse me, right now, Black and brown people are under siege. Like with all of the opportunity that we want to make sure there's room for everyone to be who they are and come as they are and meet them where they are. But people are coming in stressed to work because, it's traumatic. And so here we need to take that trauma onto ourselves because we're not immune to it by any means. And if you're hurting, we're hurting. So we need to show up in every single way, both through civic action, through how we operate our businesses and how we treat each other and our clients and how we show up for each other.
Thank you, Julia. I mean, we'll hear more later about some of the things that you're doing, but appreciate that. So I guess we'll go over to Myles. So Myles, for you, allyship, what does it mean to you? And why is it necessary at this point in time?
I think allyship is something that people have needed forever, certainly more so now than previously. It helps us provide opportunities to people that wouldn't otherwise be able to take advantage of those situations, whether it be educationally, financially. There's guidance that we can offer people through allyship. You're mentoring people. Years ago when I was first starting out, I just remember my mother telling me, everybody needs a rabbi, regardless of where you come from. Everybody needs help, everybody needs assistance, and I think that's truer now than ever before. So for me, that was allyship even then that she was promoting.
Very good. Thank you. And I think, each of us defines it in our own unique way. We talked about, Myles, the sort of description being taking on the struggle as if it's your own. How do you do that?
Well, you have to be compassionate. You have to understand what's going on out in the world. And it's, there's been systemic racism that's been going on for not just generations, but hundreds of years in this country. And I'm always constantly surprised about how rampant it is out there. And it's heartbreaking. So when you take a look at these things and you're exposed to these, all you can try to do is try to make things better. You try to make your own business as diverse as possible. You try to, judges, Sue and I were discussing before regarding people that are legally blind. You judge people as they are as people, not as what color they are. What are their capabilities? What are their qualities? What are their potential? And I think that's the direction that everybody has to go in.
Thank you, Myles. For me, it's people you're around. The people you're around, you can sometimes see through their eyes. For me, it was people like Terry Ingraham and others who I spent time around who shared their own stories. I think it's been incredibly powerful to hear so many of these stories. Sue, if you don't mind, allyship a little bit, and perhaps a little bit of the why for you. I know you're so passionate about this. Maybe you can share a little bit about what's behind that and a little bit of your perspective on allyship.
Yeah, of course. So I agree with Terrence. It's so wonderful to see all these beautiful, bright faces. I've missed so many of you, and thanks for including me. To me, allyship, when I continue to talk to everyone in the industry, and I'll encourage all of us today, we need to come together. Like outside of this issue, we need to come together. We need to figure out how we can truly help more people. And so I always encourage us to be one team, one industry. And I really think that now we need to come together as one team and one voice to be heard, to raise awareness. I think we can have a really amazing impact on the world because we are such visionaries, right? So how do we move that forward in a new way? I think you do, Howard, you spoke this time, you spoke last session about accountability. So I think we've not got to only raise awareness, but then how do we hold ourselves accountable? We can't just talk about it in this session today or talk about it off the street. Like, what are we going to do? Concrete measures to move it forward and hold each other accountable. So that to me is allyship. To your second question on what's the why. So first of all, obviously I'm a female CEO in this industry, and there's not a lot of female CEOs in the industry or in the country. And so I have to believe, I think I've witnessed that we've been able to make really great movements around female leadership and CEOs in this country. And I've got to think if we work hard together, we can truly make a change. And I do want to call out everybody in this industry that is my counterpart, because you all have treated me with great respect. I have never had to deal with being treated unfairly because I'm a female CEO. And I think that's a big call out to all the male CEOs and presidents in this industry. And if you can do that, then we can do more. And then lastly, well, I think you guys all know a lot about me personally. Probably one fact you don't know is that I have two amazing, great, don't age me, Howard, nieces that are Black, and they're 7 years old. And they are just now starting to deal with issues of why they might be different or what's going on. They're growing up in a very rural area, all white. They are the only Black children in the school. And it breaks my heart to think about the challenges that they're going to go against. And everyone knows that I'm very much for helping female leadership. So together, I want to make a change for these two young ladies in the world.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting to hear people's stories because everyone has one. And I think to understand that better, and thank you so much for sharing, it's important because I think as we think about our own stories, we can build off of each other's energy, et cetera. Could I ask just one quick follow-up? I'm going to press you just a little bit on this one, but accountability, how are you holding, I mean, you've got a huge organization, over 600 locations. How do you keep people accountable? What are you doing to try to hold your team accountable?
So So at first, Howard, everyone looked at me like what was going to be my response, what was going to be my voice. And I was silent the first couple of weeks when all this really hit. I think, you know, seeing the horrific murder of George Floyd, along with being in a pandemic and all of us living in the world we're living in, like if there's something good that comes out of it, I think it caused us to pause and think differently. It really caught our attention. It really hit home this time, right? Because these situations have been occurring and they haven't caught our attention the way that George Floyd has. And so, you know, I went to the organization and said, instead of hearing my voice, tell me what we should be doing. Tell me what we're not doing. Tell me how we're going to improve. And so we really created a diverse group of folks across the organization, from doctors, and I'll call out Dr. Glover and Dr. Ramsey. I think you've done an amazing job in the industry of bringing Black eye care perspective forward in a really moving way. But we got feedback from them. And so we really agreed on 3 accountable actions. One is we needed to raise awareness. The little things make a difference to keep the issue top of mind. 2, to provide education, right? So how do we continually raise the awareness and education around racial injustice and discrimination, and how can we support that change? And then 3, we need to support that action. So, you know, Neil, I see you on here, you know, I'm kind of talking and again, giving great congrats to Dr. Glover, but my friend Neil and Reed Foss, we have come together as sponsors to help Daryl and Dr. Ramsey move this forward so that they can raise awareness around career fairs, mentoring, recruiting. You know, how do we continually bring new people into this industry?
Wow, thank you. And thank you guys, all 3 of you, for the efforts that you're making. The resources that organizations like the 3 you mentioned can bring to the table can really make a difference. So Neil, thanks for your patience. Maybe we'll just start. You have such a powerful brand out there, and it's so recognizable and noticeable these days. So every word you say, I'm sure, is scrutinized. Perhaps you can share with us the thought process you went through about allyship, you know, what it means to you and how you've impacted or how it's impacted your organization.
Sure. Well, you know, I think everyone else on the panel did a great job describing allyship. You know, brands and businesses have an ability to influence culture and society, and it's necessary to take that responsibility seriously. You know, with power comes responsibility, and we all need to strive to be allies. Now, as a white cis male, I can't declare myself an ally. I can only be told that I'm acting in the way of an ally, or I am an ally by those who I'm trying to help. So I can strive to be an ally, and that's what I'll say. And Warby Parker will work to be an ally. But in an unequal system, right, the dominant groups, right, like white cis males like myself, right, have disproportionate power and have a disproportionate ability to have positive impact on the world and help to, you know, pull back those layers of discrimination and help to fight systemic racism. So, right, that's the role of allies, is to use the power that they have that is not earned to foster positive change.
Powerful, for sure. Neil, you know, you've been so passionate about this. You've been philanthropic from the first time I've ever met you. And I don't know if I've ever heard the story, or maybe you're willing to share. What is your story? Why? What's the why for you? Why is this important to you? Why has this been something that everything I've seen you do has had an affiliation to some philanthropic or support or causes that seem very worthy? Why?
I wish I had a simple answer for that. I guess just my parents, my mom was a nurse, still a nurse, and she instilled in me just a responsibility to serve others. And It's actually how I got into the field, was meeting an amazing optometrist who many that are watching this probably know, Dr. Jordan Cassellow, and he was telling me about this amazing nonprofit he was building that was going to train low-income women in the developing world to start their own businesses, giving vision screenings and selling glasses in their communities. And I just thought that this was such a powerful idea and a way to use business and social enterprise to foster change on multiple levels, to provide the eye care and the tools that people need to see and learn and to work, while creating livelihoods, particularly for women. And when women have access to capital, they tend to use that on the health and education of their children and communities, and you have disproportionate impact. So I learned a lot from Jordan and working at Vision Spring, and brought that to Warby Parker. And the hope is, right, how can we each use the skills and the tools that we have at our disposal to foster as much positive change as possible.
Thank you. You've certainly walked the talk for as long as I've been following what you're doing. And thank you for that, Neil. You've been a wonderful contributor to this profession. I don't think you always get the recognition you deserve for doing that. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Myles, we'll move to you for a minute if we can. I know you have an interesting story to share. Would you mind sharing with the group a little bit about what the past few months has been like for you?
Well, certainly. I'm imagining that you're alluding to the fact that as a subsequent reaction to the peaceful protests that were going around Los Angeles, there was a lot of looting going on. So obviously a lot of places, a lot of businesses, not just in the optical industry, but countrywide and worldwide, were on lockdown, basically in an attempt to contain the virus. And after being down like that for a couple of months, we were open up for about 10 days, and we were first starting to see patients, and certainly people were hesitant in the particular viral environment. And then we had the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, and it just set the country ablaze, and rightfully so. I mean, this was a keg that was really and ready to explode for quite some time. So what had happened is that in Beverly Hills, and I have offices across the city, but in Beverly Hills was our only office that was impacted. Following a peaceful protest, certain stores were looted, and I would say that in about 5 minutes, 30 years of what we have been building up in Beverly Hills was pretty much destroyed. And I was getting calls that were really wonderful from all over the world, emails, phone calls, text messages. How can we help you? How can we help you rebuild? Do you need us to clean up? And it was really very, very heartwarming. And we got an absolutely overwhelming response. But my take on it was, this affected us financially. It affected my people emotionally. But the big issue is not what impact it had on us, because, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, we were going to be whole again. And my feeling was that if this was a small price to pay, the visibility that we got and the notoriety that we got from being looted, and this bringing attention to the Black Lives Matter movement, was well worth the small price that I had to pay personally to bring to the forefront what was going on in the rest of the country. I'm a fan and a believer and a follower of the Black Lives Movement. And as I say, if this small impact, and this put us down for a couple of weeks, it was well worth having us to have this being exposed to the rest of the country. So that was our take on it, and that's how we looked at it. My daughter said something that was really important that I felt, because she's been all over her Instagram page with Zach for the longest time prior to this whole blow up, that we don't want to take this looting and have that be on the forefront of what was really happening. What was really happening is that we have to pay attention to the matter of hand, which is the systemic racism that's been going on for all of this time. She uses, I'm going to give her credit for this, she says, you know what we need to do is not pay attention to the looting, but we have to stay focused. We must stay engaged, and we have to stay involved with this particular movement. And the small issue that I had is really nothing in comparison to the bigger challenges that are at hand. So that's what our story was. And, we're firm believers of this, and, we're full-on supporters of this movement.
Thank you, Myles. We talk a lot about, and have talked so far a lot about, what each of you are doing, but I think, recognizing not everybody is supportive of this. And I've heard at times people say, well, I'm a little worried about coming forward. I'm a little worried about making my position known because I have this diversity of patients or this diversity of customers. And because people fall on the continuum, I'm a little worried about those who might not share the same perspective I do. Julia, put you on the spot a little bit. It's a tough one, but how have you managed that? How have you managed perhaps those who maybe don't necessarily see it the same way you do? You have a business, you want people to participate in your business, but have you received anything that has been less than complimentary, and how have you managed that?
On occasion over the years, we've received things that have been that haven't been aligned with our own views and how we operate and who we employ, and we allow people to come as they are. And when I said that earlier, I think that's really important. You can't police. I think within the stores, you can't police people's Blackness either. You can't just have one way that you can show up in the world that's acceptable and comfortable for white people. Like, that is a huge obstacle that I think that I see over and over again, that we've had to overcome at times as well, where we are here to service the client. We're here to help people see. We're here to make a space and an environment that is comfortable for our team, where they can be themselves, and this is our community. So not everyone needs to agree on everything, but you do need to agree on basic human rights. This is not a debatable, it's not up for debate. And if someone wants to debate that, the store is not the place to do so. And it's our job if we are to be allies, it's our jobs to step up and speak up to those people and realize it is people over profits every day of the week. There will be no profit without the health of all people. So, and it's basic, but it's also very, very singular, because people are different of how they want to approach certain subjects. And everyone comes at it different. The most I've recognized over the years is it's all white people, mostly white men, who make it a point to tell me they're uncomfortable with most often a Black female employee. And I've had to look at that over the years and be like, why? And we would look at it at the time and speak on it. And over the years, I've had a better understanding of, I don't really care if you're uncomfortable. Like, every person has the right to speak for themselves and show up authentically as themselves. And I've never had anyone be unprofessional in our space as an employee. And so for someone for a client to be uncomfortable or not be able to align themselves with the same understanding, it's no longer our problem, and we don't need your dollar. Like, we're good.
Well, that's a strong position to take, and I think you probably have a lot of support here, but it can be a difficult position to take. Neil, maybe, talking to it from perhaps a larger organization. For us, we sent out a memo of a 10-step process we're looking at to really make changes at our institution. And I would say 98% of the feedback I received was positive. Unfortunately, I think it's human nature. You focus on those 2% that aren't, and you try your best to manage that. In some cases, it's difficult. Could you share, Neil, if you don't mind? I mean, you've been very forward about your position and your organization's position. How have you managed those people who perhaps don't see it the same way?
Yeah, I think that some of those folks, if they exist within Warby Parker, are afraid to speak up, which I'm glad. But to Julia's point, one of the things that we've heard from some of our team members is what Julia describes as microaggressions from customers, and at times vendors as well. So, right, you have a customer that immediately assumes one of our managers in a store that identifies as Black, the customer assumes that this person is not the manager, or same with a vendor that might be, coming into the store to fix the Wi-Fi or what have you. So what are things that we can do? We can speak out publicly, right, to help use our bully pulpit to help dismantle systemic racism. And we know that's not going to happen overnight, right? This has been, to Myles' point, something that has been building up over hundreds of years. But we can make some change, and some of that may be like what we've done in creating a more robust code of conduct for our vendors. So you want to work for us, then you ensure that you treat all of our team members with respect, and that could include providing training on unconscious bias and microaggressions, so that way those don't occur within the four walls of a Warby Parker store. But we try to spend a lot of time to be thoughtful and create a framework for how we could affect change. And what is a strategy? A strategy is a guide on how to deploy resources, human and financial. And we want to be deploying more resources to fight systemic racism, but we want to also deploy them in the most productive way possible. So where can we affect change? It's internally at Warby Parker, and it's within the industries that we operate in, whether that's the optical world and the world of optometry, or the tech sector, which, like the world of optical and optometry, is way underrepresented, and we are in a unique position to affect change in those worlds.
Thank you. Myles, did you have a comment?
I think that, over the course of the years, we talk about diversity and putting your team together, where I think now everybody needs to really be much more aggressive and more hands-on in making that happen. In our particular case, it sort of happened not by, we didn't have an agenda. My offices have a great cross-section of diversity that just happened because we were looking for talented people. In suit, when we go back to our earlier conversation, I think before we went live with people that are partially sighted, we viewed every interview that we had in filling a position with the right person, not the right person of color, not the right person from which part of the country you're from, but just for the right people. And we found that our mix ended up being extremely diverse, I guess pretty much by accident. We didn't have an agenda to make it happen. It just happened. And the interaction is wonderful. We don't have what Julia was encountering, what she was sharing with us, where people are coming in and being that aggressive. If you're that aggressive and you're not happy dealing with the people that we have, then you don't have to deal with us. I think that if you always err on the side of right, profitability will always come. And so in regards to what Julia said, I totally agree with you.
Well, I admire that position, to be honest with you, to take that position to say we're not, even if it means less revenue for us, we believe in this so much. Terrence, do you want to say something?
Yeah, we actually have a really good question. I think it's geared more towards Neil and Sue. Speaking on the topic of the lack of representation and senior leadership of Black people of color, someone says, how can employees of an organization hold the company they work for accountable for the lack of response to the current environment, or even the lack of Black people of color, women in positions of leadership?
Maybe Sue, we'll let you start, and then Neil can comment as well if you'd like.
Yeah, and I echo all of the comments that you guys have shared. I mean, they all thread together. And Neil, I think you make a really good point. Like, with leadership comes great responsibility, right? And I can tell you, or how I feel, that I think this is one of the hardest times to manage through, to lead through. There's no guidebook for us to do this. I mean, we're learning as much as everybody on this Zoom call today. I think, Terrence, to answer that, I mean, in full transparency, I think I have a very, very diverse workforce, but I think there's areas of the business that I didn't necessarily understand or look at the same way, whether it's from an optometrist standpoint or from my management leadership. I think looking at the stats and going deeper, I mean, we're in the business of acquiring practices, and a lot of the practices we first started acquiring were male, older, white, right? And now as we're continuing to go along this and we saw all these females become optometrists, we thought it was fixed. But when you look at those numbers and you understand that those numbers are really more Asians or Hispanics, that the Black category of optometrist hasn't changed. And when this first started happening, and I started just taking a mental collection of my team, and I started thinking, you know, it doesn't come though into the organization. It starts in the communities, and it starts with the fact that the search firms, which I hold myself accountable for, they're not bringing me enough diversity in the candidates that I'm interviewing too. So, I mean, this is a larger problem than just within this industry, but I think, you know, it keeps going back to accountability. We have to understand what metrics we're going to hold ourselves to. We all are business leaders and owners, and I know we all have metrics in our business to understand our profit or our needs or how we congratulate success. This should be no different than any of those metrics. I mean, we have to get that serious about it.
Thank you. So we're here from Neil too. I just want to quickly say one of the opportunities we have is to mandate a diverse applicant pool. And for us, we're looking at that. We're not going to look at an applicant pool unless that applicant pool is diverse. And if people are telling us we can't find it, then keep looking and look in other places. I think it's important that we do our best to mandate that type of activity. Otherwise, I just don't see it changing. So glad to hear that you're making good progress there. Neil, would you like to try?
Howard, I'm sorry, Neil. I think on that, I mean, we have to look at all parts of the organization, right? We have to look at education and training. We have to look at recruiting. I mean, you truly have to look like how it's connected. You can't just say, I'm going to go recruit this. It's how do you develop people? How do you bring people in? How do you introduce? It's not just one entry point that fixes this problem.
Absolutely. Neil?
And to build off of that, right, one step of the process is to, you know, set expectations with recruiters on the candidate pool, but it's also to create a process that hopefully removes as much as possible unconscious bias, right? Whether that's something as simple as removing names from resumes and reviewing resumes independent of names, because there's all this research that shows that, right, people immediately form opinions based on somebody's name. Which immediately forms thoughts on identity and otherwise. So there's a lot of steps that all businesses can be taken to go further to create a more equitable hiring and onboarding process. And then, of course, it's about creating an inclusive environment where people can bring their whole selves to work. And if you're not creating that environment, how are you going to attract underrepresented groups? If you have low representation among Black employees, right, the first thing to do is to make your company more inviting to Black team members. And one of the first things you can do is actually speak to them and figure out what's going on. And you'll probably hear that there are lots of microaggressions or just outright aggressions, and the systemic racism, right, that exists throughout the country, right, exists in every single company in America. And I think everybody here acknowledges that, but it's worth saying out loud over and over again, so that way it really prompts action. In terms of accountability, right, the biggest thing for us is to share what we are doing and the results of those actions. So every year we publish an impact report. Our last 2 years we've published demographic data, so you can look at a breakdown of our team across gender and age and race and ethnicity. We've now decided that we're going to go further than that and share representation by department and leadership levels. So that way we're being transparent, not just with our own team, but with the public. And we expect everyone to hold us accountable. We've shared targets over 5 years because changing representation in an organization like Warby Parker, that's almost 3,000 people, right, takes time. I am proud that we have made improvements in the last few years, but we certainly have a ways to go. In response to this particular question on how employees of an organization can hold the company accountable for their lack of response or even the lack of BIPOC or women in positions of leadership. One is that you can ask, and that can also be sort of scary, right? Because there's always the risk of retaliation. And ultimately, right, the greatest power is to leave the organization and go to an organization that is more inclusive and more diverse. But ultimately, you know, it's how do you start to navigate based on the norms of your particular organization, whether that's to go to your direct manager, to go to HR, are there anonymous reporting hotlines? And if not, ask that the company put those in place, because that helps from a whole host of issues, from sexual harassment claims to fraud claims to issues of racism.
Thank you. You know, Terrence, I know you directed those to Sue and Neil, but it might be interesting to hear from the smaller, you know, organizations, how they're dealing with it. Maybe very quickly, you could ask Myles and Julia to comment.
Sure. I think that there is a definitive difference between diversity and inclusion. Being diverse, if your diversity does not allow people of color or other minorities to be inclusive in the process of your organization, then all you're doing is sort of paying lip service to the fact, well, listen, I understand that classically there's 5% of minorities in a particular company. There's 5% of Black people in this particular organization. If now you follow all these mandates and you are trying to do at least superficially the right thing, and now you increase your workforce to 15 or 20%, and it's Black employees, if they're not inclusive in the process, all you've done is change numbers, but you haven't changed the environment. So I think it's important that if you're hiring people of color to simply fill low-level positions to get your numbers up so it looks good on your P&Ls, on your annual reports, inclusiveness becomes extremely important, that they need to have a say in what's going on, because their needs need to be addressed. And if you don't do that, all you're doing is popping up numbers that really have no meaning. So I think there's a big difference between diversity and inclusiveness. And I think they need to go really hand in hand.
Terrence, perhaps we'll give Julia the last word on this one. Julia, anything to add? A lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, I think inclusivity is the main point, and so is mentorship, and so is accountability. All of these things are woven together, and there needs to be, I think where you started was, there needs to be a place of trust in order to be able to do all of these things effectively. And that means every person, anyone who wants to show up as an ally has to understand there is much a part of the problem in order to be a part of the solution. And so you need to put yourself aside and see how you can dismantle things that have been around far longer than we have and may not be dismantled by the time we leave here. But we've played a role in significantly bettering the world that we live in.
Thank you, Julia. Terrence, I'll throw it back to you. It looks like there's several questions coming through. Did you want to try to interject here, or we can move forward, whatever you like?
You know, if you want to move forward, Howard, I know you have some really good ones there, and we'll probably come back a little later to a few more questions.
All right, thank you. So I think we'd like to hear, we've heard a lot about philosophically what's going on, maybe tangibly, what have you all done in your organizations, be they, you know, moderate size or very large? What actionable things are you actually doing? And my hope is by listening to some of the great things that I know you're all doing, we all can get some good ideas about how we may be able to implement some of those fantastic ideas into the things that we've been doing. So Sue, I know you've been very active in this area. Would you mind sharing with everyone your philosophy in terms of the actions that you've been taking?
Yeah, so I think first of all, no matter how much I tell you we're doing, it's not enough, right? So I'll love to hear everyone else's responses, and I think there would be great to have a forum of sharing that so that we can all learn from each other and add it. A couple things that we've done is the intranet site. We've devoted a page just focused on this subject for continued education and awareness. You know, it's included reading recommendations, it's all of that. I mentioned to you earlier, Howard, we're making sure it's truly connected to every part of the organization too, from the recruiting process. I think, Neil, you're exactly right. You know, you shouldn't even see, you know, necessarily people's names on applicants so that you have a fair process. There was actually a study out that I read about this morning that I was amazed at, that talked about how based on the intensity of the color of your skin was how you were viewed in an applicant position, or you were actually paid, right? Like that's, even if you have the same exact education. So it's got to be a fair process in how you're evaluating people and bringing them in. You know, there's a lot of great materials outside of our industry too. So I'm in a lot of CEO groups and others in the investment world. So how do you continue to elevate myself as an industry leader and as a leader of the organization? The committee that I talked to you about earlier that we put together that really went out and talked to us about what we needed to do, we actually have them come forward every 2 weeks and give an update as to what more we need to do and where we're missing it and where we need to be held more accountable to. I mentioned about us, you know, supporting Black eye care perspectives as a sponsor so that we could really drive awareness. You know, I mentioned about how the statistics of optometrists are remaining the same in the Black category. So how do we move that forward? We're finding those things. And then as an industry, there's some big players out here that we're supporting, you know, children's exams and glasses in third world countries. And so while that's important, I think it really needs to be more focused in this country, because we have to start at the community level. We have to start making sure that people can see properly. Through that, they can be educated more effectively, and we can make a change in there. So we're actually, one of the things we're doing is we're making sure that MyEyeDr is setting up days of services in the communities that we're at, that we're going into the community to actually do the eye exams and provide the glasses so that we can help make that difference. And that's just a few of the things. I mean, again, it's not enough, Howard.
Well, never enough, right? I mean, we all have a lot of work to do, but if we all make our contribution, I think the likelihood of us moving forward in a positive way is much greater. Did you want to mention I think you mentioned earlier the project that you, Neil, and I think NBI are working on? Is that something you're prepared to talk about today, or not just yet?
Well, I'd love for you guys to be able to turn on my friend Dr. Glover so that he could give it the proper justice. I see him smiling. I don't know if we have that capability, but I'd love to have him plug this in.
Terrence, can we make that happen? Can we hear from Daryl?
Oh, he didn't give me a shout out in the beginning, so I don't know. But
yeah, we
can go ahead.
But that's okay. Dr. Glover, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. I didn't know I was going to get put on the spot, but it's all good, Sue. I still got all the love in the world for you. But,
so what can you tell us about this great project that you guys are working on together?
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to really work with the industry leaders. MyEyeDr, of course, you know, that's the company that I represent and I got much love for. And I'm so amazed and so grateful to have an amazing CEO that can really, you know, just put herself out there and really tackle the problems of what we're experiencing in the Black community right now. Not just in eye care, but just in the world in general. So definitely shout out to MyEyeDr. But we're also teaming up with Warby Parker and National Vision, and we're doing some great things. We know there is an issue with Black representation in eye care. And we know in order to increase Black representation in eye care, we need to be able to get more doctors in the pipeline. So what we're doing is we're working together to do something known as Impact HBCU. And for those that may be unaware of what HBCU stands for, that's Historic Black College University. So basically what we're doing is on one day, October 6th, we're gonna have one message, one day, visit all campuses and talk to them about eye care. We're gonna educate them about how great our profession is. We're going to show them that, you know, in eye care, it's widespread. There's so much that you could do. I mean, for example, myself, I'm an optometrist that practices with MyEyeDr, but I also have a digital media company where we have the #1 podcast in the world for optometry. And I'm also a social media influencer. So we're going to show how diverse and how sexy optometry is. And we're going to work with these industry leaders to be able to make this happen. And they have helped us out in regards to funding, but we're also going to be able to use some of their brain power and some of their troops that they have in their organizations to help spread the word as well. But basically, we're going to hit all the historic Black college universities on one day and give a message and tell them how great eye care is. And we're going to start working with the pipeline. And then we'll work with these students over time to help them with assessing their applications, counseling with them when it comes to the applications, and then also work with them in regards to being a part of a pre-optometry club while they're in school so they can have that inclusivity. Because again, we know it's not going to happen overnight, but we can use the power of social media and digital presence to be able to bring everyone together so they feel more inclusive in regards to this. And then we're going to help them transition out of optometry school into the workforce as well to make sure that they have that smooth transition also. But that's it in a nutshell. We're just going to create major awareness. This is just one little step to make this great and make this profession grow and be more diverse. But again, I take my hat off to the wonderful Sue Downs and then also Warby Park and NVI. I greatly appreciate you guys for being a part of the Black Eye Care Perspective Initiative of Impact HBCU. And if you want to be a part of this, feel free to hit up blackeyecareperspective@gmail.com. We can always use your help and your support, and that's for everyone in the industry, because this is for all of us. Keep in mind, a more diverse workforce will help us to be able to produce better results at the end. Statistics have proven that. So look forward to working with everyone. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Glover.
Daryl, thanks for the shout out. And Terrence, you're still my favorite, okay?
Oh,
but I think this is a great forum.
By the way, Terrence, I think Daryl laid down the gauntlet there, saying he's got the #1 podcast in the industry. I think this is a little contest is going to have to be going on.
No, you know what? I actually take my hat off to Dr. Glover and Daryl because he deserves to have #1 podcast in the industry. It's a really good one. So shout out to you, Daryl. I tune into that podcast all the time. So shout out to you.
He does, and while I appreciate the shout out, I mean, this is a great forum with so many business leaders on here. How can we all contribute to help supporting the cause? That's really why I wanted you to speak. So thanks, Daryl.
Thank you again.
Howard, this is a great question that came in on Facebook, and this is something that I haven't thought about when creating this panel. And they mentioned My Eye Doctor by name, but I think this question can really go across the board. It's talking about how can African American owned brands and companies, frames or suppliers, gain the attention and the opportunity to be placed in positions at retail establishments in our industry. I mentioned My Eye Doctor by name, but I think this can go really for anyone that comes in. Maybe we could have Sue and maybe one of the independents answer this question.
Yes, I'll start just a little bit. You know, we saw the definite need back a couple years ago, and I'll shout out my good friend Gilda, the beautiful lady there. We were actually working with her on developing an exclusive line for My Eye Doctor with Shaq for just exactly that reason. That was going to be launched this summer during back to school campaign. So I think, you know, continuing to elevate the visibility of those brands so that we can see them, and continuing, as I said earlier, as one industry with one voice. You know, we need to stop focusing on how much board space everybody has. We need to be focused more on how we have all products to meet all patients' needs and working together to meet those needs of those patients too.
Thank you, Sue. You know, Julia, you have such a reputation for having such unique frames and interesting things. I think it's a great question. Is it something you've considered, and how are you dealing with that issue?
Well, we're significantly smaller, which gives than a My Eye Doctor or a lot of these organizations and stores. So it allows us two things. One, we can be a bit more agile, but at the same time, we also don't have the same kind of capital. So we have to be able to divest from certain collections in order to make room to allow for new brands to come in. A lot of it is awareness and making sure that we're aware of, we try to find designers kind of at their earliest stages and find designers that we want to be a part of their, to help nurture and give them space in order to, because at the end of the day, it's all about what's on people's faces and how good they feel wearing it. And Black designers aren't just for Black customers, just like every designer we work with for the most part. They're diverse in country, they're diverse in ethnicity, but there's very few Black designers that are available. And I'm so grateful for Terrence, who a couple days ago did a meetup and like a mentorship with different designers, and it brought answered to my attention, which was like for Ashley, which I just absolutely adored her pieces. And to know that that's one of her very first pieces, I mean, the sky's the limit. Like, so to be able to find designers at their earliest and be aware that, and also to keep accountable the designers that we work with, that everyone that's working in their companies also, that it's an inclusionary kind of environment, that they're not being exclusive in that sense. So while we do interesting products and unique things, it's really to have people show up as their authentic selves. So we want to have beautiful pieces for people who, for everyone. So when they put them on, they feel like themselves. And I think one of the barriers that I hear quite often, I know Coco and Breezy have said this many times, they're like, you know, Black designers are not just for Black people. Like, why, I don't know why anyone would think so, but I know that that's been a barrier in being able to come into certain stores. So for us, we have a really diverse clientele, a diverse workforce, but unless people can show up as who they are, you know, we need to be able to find those things so people can be expressive in their eyewear.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. You know, Terrence, I think it might be a good idea if we could capture who are the Black companies that are represented in this industry. And I think not a lot of people, I mean, Coco and Breezy have been great. I had the pleasure of being on with them. Another great quote from them was they'd come into a practice and someone said, well, look, I don't have any Black patients here, so I don't really need to carry your frame line. And their answer was, that may be the reason you don't have any Black patients here, because you don't carry our frame line. So, I mean, they're, you know, a little more recognizable out there, but I know there are a lot of companies, or there are companies that are Black owned. If we can identify those and make sure people know it and they have the desire to move forward. Neil, perhaps you'd like to chime in on this. I'd ask maybe a two-part question for you as we're sort of starting to wind down. One, to address this issue, but also what has Warby Parker been doing? I want to make sure you have an opportunity to share a little bit of some of the great things that your organization has been doing.
Sure. Well, probably don't have time to cover all of it, but what I'll include here is just a link to our racial equity strategy in the chat room if anybody wants to check it out. And, you know, I think even beyond where optical stores source their frames from, if you think about your entire vendor strategy and look at your vendor base and start to collect information about, is it a Black or women or minority owned business, and look at the data, and you can work to improve those numbers to ensure that you're using your spending right to promote racial justice and equity. So that's one small thing that that all businesses can do. You know, we're looking both inwardly and outwardly. So whether that's increasing Black and BIPOC representation in leadership levels, and we have specific targets for that, and we've publicly committed to adding a Black director to our board. You know, we're a venture-backed business, and a lot of venture-backed businesses, and most businesses, frankly, the board includes lots of investors. And just as, right, the world of eye care is not well represented, either is the world of finance and investing. So again, we need to be tackling all of this in a multi-pronged approach. And I'd encourage everyone to constantly look at the data. Right, less than 3% of optometrists in America are Black, whereas the population is more like 13%. Right, so there are these huge discrepancies, and if you look at every aspect of our industry, right, we'll see that. So we've also been thinking, how do you create more mobility for our BIPOC team members, whether that is around mentorship or training, and one of the and that training is both to provide skill set and management training for our BIPOC team members, but also training for our white managers and team members around unconscious bias, microaggressions, bystander intervention training. So when you see something, how do you say something appropriately? But also knowing that a lot of professional development happens outside formal channels, right? And there's a lot of tribalism, right, within every single organization. So who do you go and get lunch with? Who do you talk to in the hallways, right? A lot of people tend to gravitate towards people that look like them, and that will perpetuate the lack of diversity in many businesses. So we need to recognize every challenging layer that we need to overcome here to create sustainable and lasting change.
Thank you, Neil. And look, I know there's so much more we could be sharing. I'm going to kick it back to Terrence in a second here, but I do just want to add, and seeing some of the comments that are coming through, there's so many people on this call who have made major contributions. And perhaps if there's some who haven't yet decided what they're going to be doing, I hope this panel has inspired you to be thinking about other things. I think one thing that came out of this, or many things it did, but you know, it would be great, and I wonder if the Vision Council would be willing to do that. So many people are doing great things where others are out there looking for what can I do, what should I do? Perhaps we could aggregate some of these great ideas. I mean, Neil, thank you for sharing and being so forward with sharing the things that you're doing, but perhaps we could find a way to aggregate this information and look at these great ideas and suggestions that so many people are coming up with and so many people have posted on the chat. So I want to just personally, Terrence, thank our guests. Thank those who joined us today. I hope this is just the beginning of a very long and continued discussion that we will have together. It's not an easy one, but it's an important one to have. And we thank you and the Vision Council for giving us an opportunity to share some of our thoughts. I want to personally, again, thank our guests, thank the participants, thank all of you, over 100 of you have joined us today. We appreciate it very much. Terrence, thank you for letting me be part of this as well. And again, I hope this is part one of many that we'll be able to do in having very open discussions like this. Again, I really appreciate Vision Council and your willingness to do so. So I'll kick it back to you. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Howard. Actually, this is part two of a long list of journeys. I want to thank everybody for joining us. A question that's come up a lot in my private chats was, since you talked about and Julia bringing out about Black frame designers and where to find them. Every other week, I'm going to be dedicating an hour or so to mentorship for up-and-coming Black frame designers. We had our first session last week. I am working with experienced frame designers, some of them being part of the eyewear designers of the Council of Fashion Design of America, this EDCFDA, and they will be mentoring from the design side to the business side to the marketing side to be able to get more representation when it comes to Black designers. But there are many out there. People, if you would like to get a list of who I know so far, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at The Optical Poet. We have some, Ashley is here from On Tour. Shout out to you, Bolton Eyewear, Savant and Scholar, Barbados, Eyes on Barbados as well. So many more Black designers that are out there looking to get their name out there, so let me know. But I want to thank everyone for participating. It was interesting, people were asking, well, how's this gonna work? Having a panel with no people of color on it. Well, I know Sue, I know Julia, I know Dr. Zakheim for many years. And knowing Howard, I knew that his recommendation would have you, Neil. I knew how this discussion was going to go. It's going to be a very powerful discussion. And I think all of you did not at all let us down. So we really appreciate you being vulnerable, being brave to be on here. And we look forward to more discussions like this. The way we're going to go out is just a little different from our usual coffee talks. About a month ago, I had the just amazing opportunity to work with 17 other Black people of color in this industry to roll out the Open Your Eyes campaign, which was really an invitation from the Black optical industry to everyone to become allies of diversity and inclusion. So on our way out, I'm gonna play a brief video that we all worked on. If your speakers are up, let you know, you may wanna turn them down a little bit. There is some music involved in here. And we look forward to you guys all joining us and becoming allies and opening your eyes and becoming allies of diversity and inclusion. So Nabil? Thank you, Nabil, and thank you all for sticking around for that as well. So we thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Any feedback you have on this, feel free to reach out to me via Instagram at The Optical Poet. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Dr. Zach. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Neil. Howard, of course. Thank you so much, and all of you for joining in.
If I could, Terrence, I just want to say there's never been a more important time than now that we be there for each other. And I know we can count on this group for sure, but I hope this group can go out and get another group and another group, because by doing that, we will make a difference. And this eye care industry can set the example for how you can truly make a difference. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. See you guys next week for Coffee Talk. Thank you.
Well.
Thanks, Dr. Zach. Appreciate it.
Right.
Daryl, thanks for being here, Daryl.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Excellent. Take care, Dr. Zach. We'll see you.
Julie, I'll see you in the neighborhood.
See ya.
All right, take care.
Hey, Marge, you stick around. So, Julia, thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me for Ben. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Howard, you asked, Howard, he left. I think the question he asked you about, you know, what's the representation and the impact of stating how you feel, and are you thinking about basically how your customers and your colleagues feel when you state your opinion? I think that's a perfect question for you, seeing that, you know, you're just unapologetically an ally.
I mean, I just try to show up, but at the end of the day, like, it's a team. Like, no one's going to do anything great on their own, and no one's going to do anything significant with people who think and look exactly like them. It's not going to happen.
No, agreed. Hey, Alem is here. Hey, Alem.
Hi, Alem. Hi, Mama.
Good to see you, sister. Love you too. Love you too, Alem.
Look at that. Wow.
Julia, you think you're gonna keep it long, or when this is all over, you think you're gonna?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait until I can sit on it, and then I'll make a decision.
That's funny.
I'm already halfway there, so figure I might as well commit.
You know, I saw a picture, I think you posted of an old picture of you where you had a very short cut.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so dope. It was so dope.
Yeah, I actually had my head shaved at Vision Expo in front of a room full of people, and we raised to raise money for St. Baldrick's Foundation. And Scott Bellastari out of the Bay Area encouraged me to not just do it in my bathroom for selfish reasons, but to do it in front of people to raise some money. So I shaved my head at Vision Expo one night during the loft party.
You guys had a lot of fun before I joined the team, huh? Wow. I'll tell you one thing, the cut looked good on you. I was like, wow, she wears a shaved cut really well.
It was a lot easier than this, I gotta tell you. A lot easier.
Oh man, this is great. It's good. Hey, Dave. Free Fel. Good to see you, bro. All right, guys. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming again. I'm gonna sign off from the after party. Liv, Nabil, you guys need anything from me?
Good.
We're good?
Yep.
Julie, I missed you.
Me too.
I miss being in LA this time of the year.
You miss travel. You miss airplanes and airports and good food. Like, I miss going out for food, man.
I know. I miss turn down service.
Yeah.
That's what I miss the most. I miss turn down service. There's nothing like coming back on a long day of work, a long night from work,
mm-hmm.
and your bed is made again, and there's water, and there's a chocolate somewhere there. That's what I miss the most. I know. I sound very, very, very first world.
We're allowed to have some first world problems on occasion. We're allowed to miss the civility of it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, hopefully on the other side of this, it'll be far more civil, far more enjoyable. You got your banana.
Yeah, banana. Yeah, that's Dave's new turn down service. Bananas.
Nice.
All right, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Julia, thank you. We'll
Lots of
talk
love,
soon.
guys.
All right, love
Later.
you too. All right, bye now.